2020 meeting of the Select Board to order, and welcome everyone. And I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Escobedo,
Present?
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Ms. Ackerman,
Present.
myself, Ms. Bates, present.
Okay, and all the Select Board members are present today. Thank you. I'm going to read the consent agenda. Minutes to approve for October 29th, 2020 Committee Volunteer Subcommittee, the November 19th, 2020 Committee Volunteer Subcommittee, and we may see more in the future. I will comment to the committee. The Town Accountant warrants, November 25th, 2020. A gift acceptance from the Concord Carlisle Community Chest with special thanks for a donation of $3,062.50 to the volunteer coordinator account for the COA, for the $10,335.50 to the COA outreach worker account, $4,437 to the social services coordinator account, also for COA, and $7,087.50 to the community services coordinator gift account. Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
And that's unanimous. We're now ready for the town manager's report.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And as we did in the pregame, I hope everyone had a safe and healthy Thanksgiving holiday. So first, I'd like to introduce our new Chief Information Officer. Jason Bolger is here with us, as I think I reported last time he came to us from the town of Tingsboro, where he was in the same role for them. And I just wanted to introduce Jason to the board and give him a minute to say a few things about himself and put the face to the name.
So welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a pleasure to be here in front of the Select Board, and I did come from the town of Tingsboro. Before that, I did work for the town of Groton. I've been working for municipalities for about 10 years now, and I've been in IT for over 20 years, so I do have a lot of previous experience. I'm very excited to join the Concord team, and I have now been in 3 SMT meetings, and I just am very pleased with the level of professionalism that I'm seeing in this town. And I'm just very excited to see how I can take Concord to the next level. And I'm eager for this board's and the public's input on, how we can move IT to another level and also adhere to the goals, in the Envision document and in this board's goals.
Thank you very much. And a lot of success to you in the town with your position. So thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Okay.
So
Back to the town manager's report.
yes. So we were just talking about Christmas decorations, and I was already going to give a report about the storm that's happening now and is going to be happening overnight. And I was going to make the comment, bring in your inflatables, because I've noticed a lot more inflatable Christmas decorations this year. But in all sincerity, if you do have them, you should bring them inside or deflate them and stow them, because we are going to get some very high winds this evening, possible for power outages. So people should really make sure that they are charging their cell phones now and putting in a little bit of precautionary measures, ounce of prevention. But it does look like we are going to be not as high as the southeast part of the state and Cape Downs, but still winds in excess of 40 miles, gusts in excess of 40 miles an hour here. So just, our departments are at the ready for it, but just want to make sure as a kind of a PSA that people take care and be mindful of stuff that they have in their yards. So another thing that has happened that we've been watching is community spread of COVID-19. I didn't send out the dashboard that we received earlier today. We did talk, Susan was here a couple of weeks ago. Susan Rask was here a couple of weeks ago. I think the situation has evolved even further from there. Our case numbers continue to climb, like many communities in the Commonwealth. I will say that I was heartened to learn that the schools at least don't appear to be a source of spread. There are students and teachers that are certainly testing positive, but it's coming from their social circles or homes and not being spread to schools. At least that's how it appears now with the contact tracing, and hopefully, that continues. We continue to have good, the schools continue to be able to serve the community and have students in-house or in person. And so people just need to make sure that they're following guidance and wearing a mask and really taking great care at this time. It is a really, we've talked a lot about following the rules, but this really feels like perhaps the most critical time during the arc of this pandemic to really be mindful. And it's unfortunate that I think it's the time where people are just most fatigued by the whole thing and really want life to go back to normal, especially as we are in the holiday season. But it feels like it's more important now than ever to be vigilant. So that's a reminder for folks to make sure that they are taking care and getting tested if they have symptoms, and otherwise avoiding direct contact. Any questions about COVID-19 or cases? Yes. Sorry, before I continue with anything else. Sure, Susan.
Yes, Stephen, the numbers that were reflected in the dashboard documents that we got today, does that reflect the cases at MCI Concord?
It does, but I think if you subtract those cases, which are in the 90s, you can still see an increase in cases for not fixing for MCI Concord, and I think that has us somewhat concerned. Like I said, I don't think that makes Concord abnormal. I think Concord's rate of infection and the growth in infection case numbers and rate have been consistent with what other communities around us. It's just that it is happening here, and people just need to be mindful of that. We are not somehow walled off from the pandemic. It's happening in Concord too.
Thank you.
Terry?
Yes, Stephen, can I just ask if you could turn your microphone on your computer a little bit?
Oh, okay.
I think that's better. Thank you.
Did,
And Stephen,
Matt? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that this week's dashboard didn't include a breakdown by age of cases with the running totals. Is that just a change in the format, or was the page missed this week or something?
I think that was a reflection of the data collection over the holiday. And I think Susan made a note about that, but I will check on that.
Yeah, she did comment that more would be coming.
Okay, good.
To that end, I would love to put in a plug for post-Thanksgiving careful tracing or number, alerts. Since this is our first test, really, gathering test. And so.
Yeah, I mean, like the rest of the country, we are watching what's going to happen over the next 2 weeks. And if, like as I said, if we believe that contacts, even unintentionally or the best laid plans for interacting with folks over the holiday still yields an increase in cases nationally, do we expect to see that locally? And I think the consensus amongst the team here is that we probably will see some reflection of that locally, and we are we're watching for that. And honestly, we're watching it amongst our own employees as well, especially our essential employees, and making changes that we need to make to keep the employees safe, so we can continue to be here day in, day out to keep the residents safe and provide services. Anything else about the pandemic? So moving on to other issues. Townhouse renovation, it got started. The physical work of the project started on November 16th. Right now they are working on demolition on the first floor, which I was over there today, and it does look a lot bigger when the walls are opened up. But that, as is common when you start opening up walls in a very old building, you encounter some conditions you didn't know were there. And so we're kind of sorting through some of that, the random column that's holding something up that was nowhere on the drawings, or extra building materials that are present that weren't there. We weren't able to do a lot of investigatory construction because it was still, the clerk's office was still very much working in there. So we're finding some stuff out that's, like I said, I think is pretty typical when you're doing working in an old building. So right now we think the project will still be completed around the end of February, early March, but there are a few items that may need some redesign as a result of the conditions that are in the field. So if there's any delays, I'll certainly report them back to the board. But like I said, we've been at it about a little bit over a week, and so today's meeting was, okay, where do we go from here with what we've learned?
Jane,
I was just going to say we should volunteer for an episode of This Old House, because this sounds exactly like something, and I don't know that I've ever seen a municipal building in that space.
Yeah, I mean, it's any structure, but especially one that goes back as far as townhouse. A lot of discussion about floors that are uneven, and like I said, things like that. So nothing that is, stop the presses, but things that we're gonna have to work through, which may have a small impact on the schedule. Terry?
So did I hear you say early March is the estimated goal timetable? Is that to complete the renovation or to start moving the town offices back in?
It's the contractual substantial completion date. And so substantial completion is not a fixed thing. There are things that can be substantially complete, but you still can't move in. Some of it depends on, how construction went, any issues, any further issues, any supply issues, subcontractors not showing up. I mean, there's a lot of things that could impact that, but that is the substantial completion date. We may be able to move in with substantial completion and then they work around us for punch list. We may not be able to do that. We won't know until we get closer to that date.
Okay. And are all the same offices going back to the same locations?
Yes.
Okay. So there's
no divisions are being displaced as a result of this project. Everybody who was there is going back
in the same location?
Maybe not necessarily the same corner of that space, but on the first floor. Yes, everyone, the finance department that was on the first floor will be back on the first floor.
Okay.
okay, you want to proceed or
Yes, yeah, no, I got a couple of other things. Just a
Okay.
reminder that the resident satisfaction survey is still available online. If you haven't done so, please give us your feedback. We want to know how we can be better. The compost site is still open for a couple of weeks. Wednesdays, I believe it is 3 to 6 on December 2nd and December 9th. And then on Saturday the 5th and December the 12th, it'll be 9 to 4. So if people want to, if they have yard work that they're doing, I'm sure after this evening, they may have some yard waste that they may want to dispose of.
And those times are posted on the website.
Yes, those hours are posted on the website. One of the things that we talked about when I got here and has been kind of set aside in the pandemic is discussions about cell tower or cell service in downtown. And I just want to report that, we have Verizon did reach back out to us and kind of reframe the conversation a little bit. And so we are going to be trying to advance that issue. Jason being on board is going to be a help in that discussion. And so that will be something that will go hopefully back on the front burner once our pandemic response doesn't require quite as much time and energy as it has over the past 8 months. I should also add that we are also in discussions with the town of Acton. We're participating in a feasibility study for regionalizing our dispatch centers, combining our dispatch centers. It's really kind of early on to see what assets are there, how do we line up from a call volume standpoint and everything else, but we have had some ongoing dialogue about that. And I was the chair of the district committee that established a regional dispatch in Western Mass, so I have a lot of experience with this, which is fortunate. So a lot of the things that I had to live through in establishing Westcom, I think I could save Acton and Concord a little bit of time and energy on. And then just one last quick household. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Terry.
sorry about that. Regional dispatch, is that for public safety?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then the last thing is, if anybody had trouble with their email this morning, we had a system-wide Outlook issue. So if anybody was impacted by that, it was not just, it was across the board. So just a heads up on that.
Okay,
So that's it for me.
all right. Any other questions for the town manager? Thank you. So, since we've already entered the season of giving and a time when all of us are thinking about how can we make a real difference in our community, I want to invite everyone who's watching today and to reach out to your friends to encourage them to look at all our vacancies on our town committees. It's a real opportunity for using your talents across a wide range of needs that we have that cover all kinds of disciplines. So please consider that, and they're posted under volunteer on the website. And I know that there are other things that town staff and others are trying to do to assist with the outreach. So we look forward to seeing new members step up. The second thing I'd like to comment on is that on December 1st is a public hearing coming up for the CPC, for the Community Preservation Committee. It's at 7 o'clock on December 1st. And it's an opportunity for the community to learn more about the projects that are being considered for funding, and an opportunity for any input you may have. And there's also another public hearing coming up on December 9th for the Capital Planning Task Force at 7 o'clock. Both of these should be posted on the website if you need more information.
That's 7:30. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, 7:30. Thank you very much.
7:30 on the 9th. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes my remarks there. So I'm going to move on to a continuation of the public hearing that was from November 16th for an application by National Grid for grant location to install and maintain approximately 2,173 feet of 12-inch gas main on Walden Street. And I think we're going to take a roll call just to open this hearing just to make sure we're covered. So will the chair please, clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Escobedo,
Okay, this is to continue the public hearing.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous, and I so declare. So we've got a number of people here who are here today on this issue, and who would like to open for the town?
So I just would like to note, so the town has spent quite a bit of time working on this. As you can see, we have Steve Dugrin and Justin Richardson here, who have kind of led the way from our engineering division on working with National Grid on developing the requirements that we have and the conditions, I guess I should say, we have in the granted location. We also have Walter Foskett, who's here, who is an attorney who has been working with the town for a number of years on utility issues, specifically with regards to National Grid and underground infrastructure. And he has prepared some information in response to a letter we received from National Grid's attorney, Mr. Waterfall, who's here as well. And so I guess, certainly.
And Ms. Mulrooney is here as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. I did see your name here. And so we can talk about some of what we found in our research in response to National Grid, or if we want to, Walter is here to do that.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you for inviting me to the meeting. What we'd like to do is just respond to Mr. Waterfall's letter of November 17th and some issues he's raised with respect to the conditions, understandings that relate to National Grid's petition for a grant of location on Walden Street. The first item that he had raised, or issue he had raised, was whether or not, or connected to making a representation that Grid wasn't going to include that particular project in what they call the leak-prone pipe program, which is essentially a program under the Department of Public Utilities where utilities submit plans to repair leak-prone piping in different sections and communities around Massachusetts. And one of the issues that we've run into in discussing this with Grid is that the project requires increasing or putting in a new gas main, which increases the size of the existing gas main or replaces the existing gas main with a new gas main that's 12 inches in diameter as opposed to 8 inches in diameter. And in this particular instance, and in several instances before, Grid has been reluctant to basically remove what we're calling an abandoned gas main, or in certain cases, just fill it and cap it. And they've also been reluctant to reimburse the town if the town had to remove it. There was an instance a couple of years ago, which I'll talk about later, where it was a congested right-of-way, and the Grid did not want to agree to any kind of removal or reimbursement to the town in case they had to remove the pipe. So under his first issue here, he's concerned, David, that he raised the issue that the town is in some way trying to prevent Grid from recovering the costs of the project by asking you to make a representation that this particular project is not under the leak-prone pipe program. And that's not the town's intention at all. The town has no objection to your cost recovery process, whether it's in the leak-prone program or whether it's in your standard rate cases. The issue there was that we had a conference call back in the spring of 2020, and I had pointed out to you that under the DPU's program, when you submit the plan, you're required to remove and replace the abandoned pipe. And that was one particular condition that you didn't want to adhere to. And when after that conference call, you called me back and you told me that the project in question was not part of that program. And so while the town has asked for you to represent, which you have done in your letter, that it's not part of the program, is because if it is part of the program, or subsequently becomes part of the program, that we would have the right, you would have to remove the abandoned pipe and replace it, or cap it at the least part. But it's clear in the statute under Chapter 164, Section 145, that you'd be responsible under the program to remove and replace the pipe. So what we want to do is be on notice that if in fact, for some reason, after you open the ground or if your plans change, that you're going to put that particular project under the program, that we would expect that the pipe be removed. I think you might be recalling it from that discussion we had. So it has nothing to do at all with your rate recovery process, your cost recovery process.
Mr. Waterfall, did you want to respond to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is true. This project is not part of the leak-prone pipe program. I disagree with his reading of the statute. The statute does not require us to physically remove the pipe from the ground. It's more about removing it from the system. If I could finish. So regardless of our dispute regarding the interpretation of the statute, again, as you can see from the letter that I submitted, this issue is simply irrelevant and way beyond the scope of a grant of location hearing conducted by a municipality. I have represented that this project is not part of the leak-prone pipe program. That's a very specific program administered by the DPU. As we've explained, this is to alleviate a bottleneck in the service. So I really think the issue is irrelevant. If the board really feels like this language needs to be in here, I don't think it has any legal effect whatsoever. But that's our position on it. It's just not really relevant to this issue. We're not required to, under the state of the law, remove the pipe from the ground, and it's not part of this program. I will just point out that, you know, I realize this is a very specialized area of law, and you know, when I've talked about certain, you know, certain things that the municipality might have the authority to require for most private parties, some of those things just aren't simply allowable or lawful when applied to a highly regulated public utility. And the case law is pretty clear on that. And I'll also just add that there are, not only is the municipality pretty heavily restrained in terms of regulating a utility, but we're restrained too. I mean, there are certain things, certain practices, construction methods and so forth that utilities such as National Grid or Eversource probably would like to maybe do differently, but we're also constrained by the law as well. So, you know, we have to follow it, the municipalities have to follow it, and it's all regulated by the DPU. So I guess that's a long way of me saying that if the board feels that this language needs to be in your grant of location conditions, I don't think it has any legal effect whatsoever. But I can represent as an attorney for National Grid that this project is simply not part of this DPU program that's under that statute that the town's attorney referenced.
Well, as I stated before, I think it is relevant to the town because it would, if it were in the program, which we clearly understand that it's not, if it were in the program, then would certainly be a cost-saving mechanism for the town to have the utility take it out, pipe out, or at least reimburse the town for the cost. So I don't think it's totally irrelevant. I don't think it's, I think it's appropriate that if the DPW wants to include that language, and you know, these are conditions, understandings, and other items that the DPW wanted to include in the grant of location. So there's nothing in there that's caused, like you just said, there's nothing in there that's going to cause you any additional burden, other than the fact that I would recommend that the condition actually be that if in fact at some point in the future this project was moved into the leak-prone program, that you would be required to give the town 7 days notice within the before the filing.
Well, do you
Can we
want to
move
maybe,
on?
yeah, well, do you want to maybe get through, why don't we have you go through all of the sections and then
Okay.
maybe,
So the second item that you raised, David, was you're concerned about the permit stipulations, that the CPW reserves the right to add and or adjust permit stipulations, and you advise the town that the right-of-way permit must be consistent with state law. You're objecting to the condition because be included in the right-of-way permit. And it seems to me like you're making an assumption that for some reason, one of the changes or adjustments to the permit would be in violation of state law. And the town is not in the habit of violating state law, first thing. And then you refer to, regardless of that, you're required to comply with the requirements under DTE 9822, a regulation implemented by the DPU, which requires you to adhere to certain standards of work. And in that regulation, under Section 3, permit requirements, it states very clearly that the permit may be modified or revoked with just cause at the municipality's discretion without rendering the municipality liable, among other things. In addition, the language that the town's asked to include in the stipulation, in the condition, is that the stipulation would be related to construction standards, work quality, work site maintenance, schedule adjustments, etc. All of these to address new information and conditions related to the project or site, which is not unusual in the course of a project being conducted. So I don't think that you're raising a red herring here. There's nothing in that stipulation or that condition that is inconsistent with state law, and it allows the town, as it's stated in the very regulation that you have cited, that the town's perfectly has the right to do so in situations where the situation changes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree generally to that statement. The only point I was trying to make is that we feel, as you can tell from the letter, that some of these conditions that are suggested are inconsistent with state law. And so my only point was that in issuing the road opening permit, you know, not only are we objecting to these conditions as applied to the grant of location, but if they were for whatever reason, you know, incorporated into the road opening permit, we would likewise object to that. To that situation as well.
But I think that's a situation, that's an event that you'd have to deal with at the time.
Mhm.
Because right
I
now,
agree.
that's not there. So if you want to raise an objection down the road, if the CPW decides to amend or restate the permit, I think the time to raise that objection is at that time, because there's nothing in here right now that evidences anything inconsistent with state law.
I would agree. I would agree.
Okay. The next item that you had raised was your objection to the life cycle maintenance fee, which arguably you're citing the Boston case, Boston Gas versus the City of Newton. Arguably, a payment for future maintenance of roadway may be objectionable, but you stated that you've never paid a life cycle maintenance fee in any town located in Massachusetts. Why, when back in 2012, you in fact paid two life cycle maintenance fees in amounts around $35,000 and $155,000 in connection with petitions for grants of locations. And I was wondering if you could distinguish those two instances from the current situation.
Well, sure. I mean, the short answer would be that regardless of, the company's failure to maybe see the issue at that time, and I don't know which attorneys were involved, the fact that we might have made an illegal payment doesn't change the fact that that case that I sent you and to other members of the town, clearly, I mean, it really couldn't be clearer that this type of fee is simply unlawful as held by the SJC. So regardless of any sort of payment that National Grid shouldn't have made or mistakenly made in the past, that does not give the town now the ability to charge such a fee. Any such fee would clearly be struck down by a court based on the clear language of this Newton case. So I
think that, in 2017, moving from 2012 to 2017, you guys raised a similar objection in connection with the removal of a gas main that was in a town right of way that was congested with other utility infrastructure. And at that time, I had responded to your predecessor, Mark Riley,
yes,
that I didn't feel the fee, which was not a life cycle maintenance fee request, but was a fee, as I had stated before, to it was a condition to either remove the abandoned pipe, and it might have been, in that instance, it might have been just to fill it and cap it, not even remove it, or reimburse the town for having to do that. And I had presented the town's position to Mr. Riley in a letter dated September 17, 2017. And we never got a response to the position. And the point of the letter was that we did not feel that the conditions that were, or the fee that we're asking for, the reimbursement, or the condition that you cap or replace the pipe was inconsistent with state law. So I direct you to go back and take a look at that letter, and we could discuss that issue further.
well, I think the decision needs to be made by the board tonight. I understand that you may disagree, but the point is that the spirit of this fee that is being suggested by the DPW, by the engineering department rather, is really seeks to accomplish the same thing as the fee that was struck down by the SJC. So I understand that
I have to disagree with you. It's not.
Okay.
It's not a matter of paying a fee to maintain the road for future maintenance. It's to, right now, during the course of this project, remove an existing pipe that's no longer going to be in use and could present a problem for the town in the future, in the event that it negatively affects the infrastructure. The pipe is just left there capped and collapses. That could cause the road to settle.
Exactly. Inspection, maintenance, all types of ongoing municipal responsibilities that National Grid is not responsible for as discussed by the SJC. I understand you and I have a disagreement on this, and I respect that. I would just suggest to the board that this is a clear issue. Of all these conditions that are listed here, this one is the clearest in terms of being an unlawful condition based on the state of the law. I understand that the attorney for the town is advocating for the town's position. I would suggest that the board not adopt an unlawful condition in its order.
I think we can return to that in a second, but let's move on to the other objections made about conditions 2 through 4 in the granted location. You make the statement that no state laws or regulations promulgated by the DPU require a public utility to own or maintain an abandoned main or remove it at any time. But again, under DTE 9822, section 4.2 work standards, the utility shall be responsible for any settlement that may occur as a result of the work done in accordance with the permit. So that, in fact, would require Grid to come back in the future if the road settled and there were problems with the infrastructure underneath it where the pipe was not removed.
Mhm.
And additionally, back in under the leak-prone pipe program, it clearly states under section 145 that you're required to replace and remove gas mains when they're part of the utility's leak-prone pipe program. So it's
The leak-prone pipe program has nothing to do with this. I thought we made that clear.
I know, but what I'm saying, you made a statement that you're never required to maintain an abandoned main or remove it at any time. And again, you are under various provisions of state law. And I would read that DTE 9822. There's additional requirements in there that are very favorable to the municipality.
Mm-hmm. I think the road maintenance standards that are talked about put a very set a time limit in terms of the patching, the inspection, the maintenance that a utility is supposed to do. It's not this perpetual. We're not required to inspect and maintain the road in perpetuity as is suggested in these conditions. That's just not the case.
That's not what we're suggesting. We're suggesting that the Grid would be responsible in the event of a problem in the road as a result of not having removed the abandoned pipe.
Again, these DTE standards that you're talking about, my response is that there's a cap, there's a firm time limit on a utility's responsibility when patching and filling in the road after a project. We, as was done in Lincoln, when we got the grant of location there, we agreed to abide by the TPU's road restoration standards, and they incorporated that into their grant of location, which I thought was a very clean way of doing it. And those are the standards that apply to National Grid and Eversource and all the other utilities in every city and town in Massachusetts. What we're objecting to is this idea that, as stated here, that we own the abandoned pipe in perpetuity and somehow are responsible for maintaining these roads in perpetuity. And, I understand the town's position, but it's just simply not what our responsibility is.
To maintain the road in perpetuity. I think what the town is concerned about is that if there's a problem with the road after project is completed and it's a result of not having removed the abandoned pipe, that you would be responsible to come back and fix it.
I would suggest that maybe
stated in DTE 9822.
Okay, then my suggestion would be to suggest to the board to incorporate that order that you cited into their grant of location, just like Lincoln did, and then we'll know exactly what National Grid's responsibilities are going forward. I think that's the best way to do it.
I'm not objecting to that, and I think you've already made that statement in your letter.
Yes. I'd be happy to provide a copy of that order to the board so they could attach it or incorporate it. That's
I
exactly
think
what we
I've
did in
already
Lincoln.
provided a copy to the DPW.
Thank you.
Walter,
Linda,
are there other items that you need to discuss, or have you completed your?
I think those are the major issues that were raised with respect to the grant of location.
Okay.
I agree.
So does the town manager want to make a further comment at this time, or should I open it up to the board?
No, I just think as we consider this, I think what just to reinforce what Walter is saying is there's not total regulation as I think is being as I infer from Attorney Waterfall's comments, and then the opposite of that is the absence of regulation. I think what we're trying to point out is there are some nuances here that we think are reasonable conditions, and that's why we put them in the grant of location. So I think I just offer that for the board's consideration, that it's not a one or the other. There are areas in the middle that I think are reasonable.
Madam Chair, if I may, the real issue here, and I know that, Mr. Waterfall's reliance on the Boston Gas case has some merit to it if you are in fact trying to impose fees for future work. But the real issue and the real concern at CPW is how to address the issue of having this abandoned pipe in this particular situation not create a problem in the future. And you have the ability to do that now. And we understand that it's a relocation of the pipe. The 8-inch pipe is on one side of the highway and the 12-inch pipe is on the other side. So it involves, opening the road on one side to put in the new pipe, but then the old pipe, which is situated on the other side of the road, would have to be open as well to take it out. And I think and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong right now, all you're proposing to do is to cap that pipe and leave it there. And I think
That's correct. That's correct. That's our standard practice. And I will just offer that, it's very common for us to work with cities and towns in terms of identifying, abandoned infrastructure and in working with the town and getting, if the future need arises down the road to accommodate some development or whatever, to work with the town and make sure that, the abandoned pipe is identified and to work with them in terms of moving it. So that it happens all the time.
So, Mr. Foskett, I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to open it up for some discussion by the board briefly, but while we're doing that, I'm going to ask you to think about the letter of current conditions, and based on this discussion and Mr. Waterfall's suggestion, if it's appropriate, what would be added so that we will be in a position to take a vote on this. Does that make sense?
okay, yeah.
Okay, so I'll now open it up for brief board discussion. Carrie?
thank you, Linda. I have to say that it appears to me that the attorneys are in disagreement still on several items. And this indicates that there are still matters to be negotiated. So I'm not comfortable taking a vote and supporting this tonight. I would ask that the negotiations continue, and rather than negotiating on camera, that the attorneys go off with the CPW and the town manager, whoever you need, figure this out and come back to the board when the negotiations are concluded.
Yeah, may I respond to that?
Yes.
I would just like to say that this is a critical project and we have a deadline in December. We're not negotiating with the town. I mean, in terms of these conditions, I've made my legal position clear. I understand if there's a disagreement, but we really need the issue decided one way or another. If this project can't take place in the next few weeks, if we can't get going, it's going to be a huge problem, not just for National Grid, but for people who use natural gas in the town. There are other people from my team on the call who can speak to that, but we've been waiting months and months and months. I've had conversations with the town manager and town attorney. They understand our position. Our position isn't changing. This is this is our legal position, but we really cannot afford, and the people of Concord can't afford for this to be delayed any longer.
And Mr. Waterfall, I also understood that there was some areas of agreement between you and Mr. Foskett, if I heard correctly, in terms of how that might be reached. Jane.
I take some exception to, I think what Mr. Waterfall just suggests. This is a application, I understand, to expand service into Lincoln. And I don't understand why the discussion, if it was judged tonight by the select board or put off to the next week, why that would be of an issue to the town of Concord's customers. That seems a bit like a veiled comment. And I think what you're engaging with here is a select board that is very active in this space. And we have, as a town, we have a number of continuing public discussions over the use of natural gas in Concord. So I think it's which is not relevant to this conversation, but it is relevant to the select board.
I would just echo Jane's comment. To me, I thought that this project was that National Grid needed access to Concord Street in order to expand service in the direction of Lincoln and Wayland. I didn't understand that there was any impact on Concord service one way or another, and I'd be interested to understand what that impact is.
Perhaps Mr. House from my team could respond to that, and I want to make sure I'm accurate on that.
Thanks, David. Yeah, the assertion that this is a growth project, I'd say, would be incorrect. The basis for this project is largely for reliability. And again, while we are increasing the diameter of the pipe, it's currently undersized. It was installed as an 8-inch main in the 1940s. So the installation of this new 12-inch main is really to support the growth that has happened from 1940 to this present day, and to support the reliability of the gas system in the towns of Lincoln, Concord, and some of the other towns to the south.
Could you speak to the impact on Concord citizens specifically?
I mean, Concord, like the other towns I mentioned, are tied into the system, and the reason for this project is the concern that the system may not be able to perform on the coldest of days, which is typically when our operating, when our temperatures are below 25 degrees Fahrenheit is when it's of most
I just
concern.
didn't understand that the flow of gas through this pipe was heading to any Concord residences.
Again, it's a reliability project, so it's a network of systems. So it's not that flow is one direction or the other. It's if there's a strain on the system, it will pull from multiple directions. So it impacts towns, including Concord, as well as other towns to the south.
Can I ask a question about any restrictions on street opening during the winter? Steve Dukin, would you be able to answer that?
Yes, Steve Dukin, town engineer. We have already had discussions with National Grid about allowing them to perform this work during the winter, essentially to avoid the summertime, the springtime, summertime, when there are a lot of activities in that area.
So the weather doesn't have any effect on the ability to open the ground?
From our experience, it's a little more difficult, especially dealing with a frozen ground. It can be done. It takes some extra effort. We have conditions in our approval, and will be in the right-of-way permit that will have National Grid do some extra work regarding restoration or trench patching in the winter. You might see, if you look at the conditions, you'll see requirements for limited amount of steel plating of the trenches, which is, would be more commonly done when the weather is different in the summertime. Simply because plating will restrict snow removal or proper snow removal. We have requirements on the type of pavement to be put back, the type of asphalt, and we will have other requirements regarding, compaction and so on.
So thank you. Susan?
Yes, thank you. I just have two questions. One is, if I heard you correctly, the existing pipe is 80 years old from the 40s. Is that correct? I believe that's when you said it was laid.
I believe so, yeah, mid-1940s.
And have you ever had any leak issues at all with the length of pipe between Route 2 and the Lincoln line?
I'm not aware of any, no.
That means you're not aware of any. Okay, thank you. And my other question is, if the board votes tonight to leave the conditions as is, what would be National Grid's next action?
I could answer that. I think we would just need to, on the one hand, we have a very, very tight deadline. If you need more different information on that, I'm sure Mr. House can provide some commentary on that and explain exactly why our deadline is so critical at this point, because we have been, this application was submitted a long time ago. In terms of the conditions, I've made, I've submitted the memo, I've spoken to, I've expanded on it tonight. So I think the board is pretty, I think the board understands National Grid's position. If the conditions that we object to were imposed, I think we would discuss it internally. We respect the board's role in this matter. We would discuss it internally and see if, just sort of assess our options. I can't really speak to that.
Okay. Stephen? You're on mute.
Yeah, no, I was having a hard time getting my mouse in place. So I think I do want to talk about the timeline issue. And I think one of the things I want to make clear from the town's perspective is that we had been working with National Grid all the way along. Now we did hit kind of a stalemate, which has been quantified or articulated by both Walter and Mr. Waterfall. And I think, so I don't want this to be perceived by members of the public that the town has been stonewalling National Grid or trying to put this project in a position where it can't be done. We have a genuine disagreement about how we've got about what the condition should be, including a life cycle maintenance fee that the company has paid before. And so I don't think we were coming at this from an unreasonable position. I think we were trying to work with them, but under a set of conditions that we felt were not only lawful, but also precedented. And so I want to make it clear that the deadline issue is not squarely on the town's shoulders. That's a shared issue because of an impasse.
Okay. Matt?
Stephen, is the life cycle maintenance fee unique to Concord, or do other municipalities impose such a fee?
I don't know how common it is. I think it's, we have the benefit of having an attorney with us who has advised us and taken a deeper look at the decisions and the DPU guidance than I think some other communities normally would. I think some communities just may say, okay, well, we've always granted these and these are the standard set of conditions, but I think Concord, rightly so, saw the future liability and especially after there wasn't, now the Merrimack Valley is not in National Grid service territory, but when you look at the conflict between live infrastructure and abandoned or soon to be abandoned infrastructure, I think everybody believes that if they're in the road, they should take out the old stuff. In this case, because it's across the road, we backed off of, quite frankly, the requirement for removal because, as Walter noted, it really wasn't reasonable to open both sides of the road. But at least if you're not going to do that, or you're not going to fill the pipe instead of just cap, because if you cap the ends, the mill can still collapse. Whereas if you fill the entire thing, then the likelihood of collapse is much less. They only wanted to cap, not fill. So we said, fine, if it collapses and the road collapses and you left it there and didn't fill it, then you should have some responsibility for that. Matt, so to answer your question, Matt, I don't know how common that is in other communities, but again, we feel that we are on solid footing in making that requirement.
Yeah, I don't think that the, excuse me, I don't think that in other communities, people haven't resisted the requirements much. And so it's one of those areas where the issue hasn't been raised. Communities go along and say, okay, replace it.
And we've clearly done our due diligence. We have a depth of experience here, and we are trying to protect ourselves as we go forward. Jane, did you want to make a comment?
I was just going to echo what both Mr. Foskett and you said, Linda. And again, I mean, I feel a duty to Concord citizenry who have raised concerns around not only expansion of natural gas, but of the concerns for older abandoned pipes. I would, the fact that, as Susan pointed out, it's an 80-year-old pipe just leaves the liability question even larger. I mean, if it needs to be expanded for reliability and safety and usability of the pipe, then doesn't that speak more fully to the reason we would want to have that filled?
So I'm going to ask the board if they're feeling prepared to take a vote, accepting the conditions as it has been specified by the town to date on this application.
Melinda, I thought that there were a couple of things that were adjusted based upon the attorney's earlier discussion in tonight's call.
Walter, are there additional conditions that need to be?
I think what might be helpful here is, and I understand that Mr. Waterfalls raised the issue of a deadline, but I still think a week's not going to make that big a difference for the deadlines. And we can certainly, I can reconvene with Stephen and company in terms of revising the conditions that might be acceptable both to town and the utility. But I would certainly, I certainly think we need to have some way here, David, to address the issue of the potential problem with the abandoned pipe.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion to continue the public hearing to December 7th, I believe that would be. Is that correct?
Yeah. Move to continue the public hearing until December 7th.
Okay.
Okay,
With the
second.
caveat that with the caveat that council will both councils will work together and so that we can proceed next week. Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Okay.
Quick discussion.
Brief discussion.
Right, basically what you just said, Linda, except, again, I don't feel that this is properly before the board until we have a set of conditions that both the town and National Grid are going to agree to. So I'm hoping that you can, by next Monday, have a set of conditions that you agree to. But otherwise, I don't think it's good use of the board's time to have this debate again next week. So as soon as conditions are agreed to, I think it should come back, and maybe that will be Monday.
Stephen?
I just in terms of the intent of the motion, can I want to ask Mr. Waterfall, or Attorney Waterfall, a question. If this motion was approved, would you report that back as as tantamount to a denial to National Grid? And because you were asked what your next steps would be, is this delay going to trigger those next steps? Or, I mean, are we going to be able to have a conversation about, some accommodations?
I guess what I can say is I would not consider a continuance of another week to be effectively a denial. My concern is that there's a fundamental disagreement regarding the state of the law here. And I do not see as to some of these issues, room for an agreement at this point. I think we are agreeing to disagree. And so, and I have to do that to represent my client, you know, because consider the fact that, you know, if we agree to something that we feel is unlawful, we're going to hear from it. We're going to hear from the DPU on it. And also we run the risk that other towns will start doing these things that we object to. So I guess my question is, you know, it's the board's responsibility to rule on this. If there's a situation where in good faith, we've spoken, both sides have spoken, and we just simply can't agree on the law, you know, we need a decision one way or another because of this critical deadline we have. And so I just don't want this to go on and on, because really we're really up against the deadline now. This is very, very close. And so I just don't want to run into a position where the board just refuses to act on something because we're not caving into the town's wishes. I don't think that would be appropriate.
Mr. Foskett.
I think, you know, the proposal that's on the table, which you haven't objected to, is to put the vote off for one more week to determine whether or not we can reach a set of conditions that are acceptable to both parties.
I
I
kind of think we've already done that, frankly. I'm sorry, but I think we've.
I don't think we have, because I don't think you've addressed some of the issues that I've raised in my letter of 2017. We can discuss that.
2017, come on.
Well, they're the same issues, to be honest with you.
It's a different case. It's a different project. I'm not addressing a letter from 2017. Sir.
So, but wait, hold on a second. So I don't see where it's not going to have a deadly impact on the schedule. And it's something that, as I said before, we're willing to work to get to a point where both sides are satisfied with the conditions.
I just don't think that's going to happen, sir. I think you and I are far apart legally, and I just don't think we're going to get there. And
I don't think we're that far.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have maybe a continuance is not going to be useful. So then we would have two other approaches that we could take: either approve with the conditions as written, and they can decide what to do about it, or reject the project. So I guess that we just needed to have a sense of the board. If the applicant is saying that they're not interested in us continuing the hearing, well, then I think we need to render a decision.
Right.
And can we clarify again, if we deny this, it just seems very vague. We heard from Mr. Hauser that the flow would go in all directions and it may impact Concord. Is there anything more specific that will happen if we deny this proposal?
Robert, could you speak to that, please?
Yes, I mean, I'll add, I'm not in our long-term planning or operations groups, but I mean, the reason for this project is a concern on our behalf to provide, you know, reliable natural gas service to our constituents on the coldest days of the year. And, you know, effectively rejecting this project and this proposal, it jeopardizes our mission of providing reliable service to our customers, regardless of the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Jane?
To Carrie's point, to Terry's point, and following up on Matt's, I'm feeling that we're being cornered here, and I do not. That's not the way the select board operates. In fact, it's not a good way to produce policy. And so I'm a little stuck because we have to look out for the benefit, the concerns and needs of Concord residents. And we haven't gotten a straight answer on the impact other than the potential impact to the town in terms of the life cycle costs of the of any road work. So I also don't believe, having worked in the public utility sector for a very long time in energy generation, that National Grid intends to appear to a municipality this way. So there's got to be some opportunity to come up with a clear set of agreements. And it doesn't seem to me unreasonable to bring this back next week with a much cleaner space. If that's not possible, or much cleaner a set of conditions, then as a select board member, I am at loath to agree to something that doesn't support the wisdom of our town staff. That's, we have a lot of respect for the people who work for the town, and that the town uses, in the case of Mr. Foskett, his skills. So this seems very counterintuitive to the way that National Grid has generally approached its customers.
Okay, we have a motion on the table right now to continue this till next week. It's been seconded. We've heard a variety of viewpoints here. Our council has suggested that we should do that. And so I'm ready to ask for a vote.
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay. This public hearing will be continued until December 7th. Thank you for everyone's participation, and I hope we can resolve this next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is priority list of CPA projects. And I'd just like to say a couple comments before we get started. One, thank you for everyone who had the opportunity and time to respond to the ranking. I want to remind all of us that our role in reviewing this list is not to excerpt the role of the CPC itself. Their role is to do due diligence and to make their own evaluations about how they're going to rank these. They do ask for our input at a high level in terms of generally how we view these, particularly and we're focusing on the town projects. And also there, as we've already mentioned, there's a December 1st public hearing where citizens can give more in-depth input also to the committee. So one way to think about this, I think as we talk about this, is maybe to think about it in terms of tiers. Maybe what we see is projects in the top tier, sort of the middle tier, and the lower tier, not that implies a lower rank necessarily, but we're sort of force ranking here as we talk about the town projects. So would someone like to open up that discussion?
I'll start as perhaps the offender that didn't pay attention to that with my first ranking and then fixed it for our final piece. And I fully remembered the discussion of that, and I just had too much fun with a spreadsheet.
It is
what?
It is inducive.
Yes, it is. So, but I can say that from my perspective, I agreed with many of the town manager's recommendations certainly on all of the must-do components. It is hard as a select board to rank things when there might be other projects that you would want to preserve money for. Should they meet the CPC's, you know, well, you want to send a signal about what you would, in the amount of money that we leave aside.
Okay. Anyone else? Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Jane said. I think that the way the regulations are written, that and I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, that a certain percentage is for each of the 4 categories. And my understanding is, in the absence of a specific project in one of those categories, that the 10% or whatever the percentage of funds is held aside.
In a reserve account for that category, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, one way to think about this, in addition to the tier thinking, is that we're not necessarily endorsing the dollar amount, the full dollar amount, because that's something that the committee is wrangling with, you know, as they do their due diligence and review each and every one of these proposals. I think we're sort of, we should be responding in terms of, as we look at this list and what we know about the town budget and what we've been talking about for the number of past few years here in terms of projects that need to get done. But in prior years, we had to rank accordingly because of other things that were more pressing, to sort of take all that into account. Terry.
Yes, I want to apologize. Apparently everybody else figured out how to add to the spreadsheet, and I have my priorities on a piece of paper, but I didn't get them on the spreadsheet, so I apologize. But I do have my priorities, and they're generally the same as everyone else. I guess the one exception that I have is I did move up the Emerson land conservation restriction, because I see this as another conclusion to continuing a project that we've been working on. And I kind of switched it out with the White Pond because almost similar to the gas company, I feel that there is still a lot of disagreement in town and confusion, and that may all change after the December 16th public hearing, but like to see more consensus on that before we proceed. But and one more thing was, I was thinking the same thing as you, Linda, that the tiers would be a really good way to go about this. That there's some top priority projects, some middle priority, some lower priority, something like that.
Matt?
Yeah, I just think I'd like to highlight where my votes were different from the consensus of the board. I think that the White Pond, again, Terry's votes were not really considered in the rundown in the spreadsheet we show here, but by and large, others were, you know, prioritizing that project, whereas I think it needs more time, just given the amount of just squishiness of the scope. You know, there was an initial proposal, but now, you know, there's all kinds of scope changes that are being either submitted or proposed. And so it just seems to me that this needs more work, you know, and that the meanwhile that the Emerson conservation restriction is, there's open questions around valuation. So I think those need to get resolved. And the smaller projects, by contrast, are relatively straightforward. And so they were very easy for me to say, yeah, you know, that what you see is what you get. And most of them seem pretty well scoped. So that explains kind of maybe the differences in my ratings as you go further down the list.
And Matt, I would just thank you for doing that. I would just say that specific to some of your comments you're making, it's not atypical for the committee itself, as it's going back to the applicants, with some of these concerns and questions, to have some of those issues resolved before they're finished with their deliberations. So you raised some good points. All right,
If I
Jane.
could- Yeah, I mean, having just sort of set a tenor in my opening comments, I did want to, some of, I think, our comfort levels as committee members probably has a lot to do with our liaison attentions. And, we may know more about planning than about certain things than we do about others. And I did want to ask, and Stephen, that you may not have this directly under your belt, but in terms, my understanding about what we have on the docket for White Pond was that was the minimum to allow us to open up and continue to minimum improvements in order to continue to operate the beach for next year.
So there's two primary issues with White Ponds. One is ADA accessibility,
Right.
and one is water quality, and the other is water quality.
Right.
And I think as as the plans have evolved, and I think Matt used the term squishiness. I think with that, how I see that is more evolution of the plans based on the feedback we are getting from the community, and also conditions that we're discovering in the field and the design as the engineers kind of work as they problem solve. Things do move and shift and evolve as things go over time. So Jane is right in that if we are non-ADA compliant, it would be, I think, our third consecutive year of that status, and we would maybe not be allowed to open the ponds. And so I think if splitting out the water quality stuff, which is is complicated, I guess, and just focus on the ADA, the disability access issues, I think that there's a case to be made for that. Although addressing ADA and water quality, especially with how the slope that leads down to the beach is going to be treated, I mean, those things are linked. And I think that's the approach that we've taken, is trying to do the things kind of combined because it makes more sense from a work standpoint. But we also hear the community in terms of, I guess I'll say, uncertainty or confusion because things have evolved. But Jane is right. I think we would have an issue with being able to open if the ADA issues are not resolved.
Okay. So I think we've got some general agreement for each of these tiers. We hear Matt's good questions and comments that he's raised about a couple of those. I would propose that an aggregate recommendation to the committee capture these three general tiers as we have them, with noting two specific comments that Matt has made without calling his name on them, but pointing out some legitimate concerns on two of those, but generally pointing to our agreement on the three tiers. Does that make sense to everybody? And it would be the select board recommendation.
Yeah, I guess it would be great if Terry's numbers were included. Terry,
I have them. I actually have them. I could share my screen and it changed the average a little.
Okay.
Well, will it only show your ratings?
No, I just finished putting mine in
Yeah,
here.
so rather than that, why don't you just read them from A through O and we'll just all copy them down, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, but when I put them in, the averages changed as well.
Yep, I can do it live. Yep. Okay.
Well, I already did it. I can just
Okay.
show my screen.
Yeah, but
if you want.
I'd rather you don't do that. So go ahead.
Okay. So let's see, you start with A. Yeah, the housing production plan was 1.
Okay,
Um,
how about B?
yes, that's a must do. I guess I didn't finish these ones.
Okay, D, D comes next.
Yeah, I had that as a 10.
Okay, C,
The flagpole is 8.
Okay. Can you just read the numbers down? So in a quick order?
Yeah, okay, so the next 3 are blank.
Okay.
Now we're on H.
Yep.
Yep.
It's 7, 6, 4, 3, 9, 5, 2, must do.
Okay, thank you. So Matt, I'm going to have you just read the numbers down for the new average.
Yeah, for the new ranking. So the new ranking is, O is number 1. A is number 2.
But just a second here.
Yeah.
A is number 2. Okay, yeah.
B is number 3.
Okay.
And K is number 4. So that would give us 1 through 4. That's probably tier 1.
K is number 4.
Yep. And then number 5 is I. Number 6 is J. Number 7 is N. And number 8 is M.
Okay, some change, but generally I think the overall ranking.
And then we get to, L is 9, H is 10, and C is 11.
No, not C. Oh, C, yeah, sorry. Yep.
And then, I thought we were not ranking D personally. But given the other people's ranks, it would be, 10 or 11. It would be 10 or 11. Yeah. Or 12 even. So that gives us 3 tiers of 4,
Right. All right. So I'm proposing that's.
Yeah, this seems like a good way to do it. I like the idea because there actually is a pretty narrow bunching, especially in the middle of the rankings. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, good. People ready, comfortable to move on? Jeremy and I will make sure that gets transmitted.
Yeah. I can
We
send
need a vote.
This is more of a consensus, I think. I don't see us taking a vote on it. All right. The townhouse renovation and schedule and town office locations. I think you've already responded to that.
Yeah, it was fresh in my head from this afternoon's meeting, so I jumped ahead of the agenda. I apologize for that.
I'm going to move on to the liquor license fee. It's really several of the purveyors have asked for some ability to schedule payment rather than one over time, as opposed to one specific payment. It really is the select board, under the select board purview to set the policy for this. So I'm going to recommend that we authorize the town manager and the chief financial officer to arrange special payment schedule for establishments to pay annual license as requested and appropriate. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, the next one is to review outdoor dining application extensions. In the process, as Jeremy pointed out last time, people are getting notices about renewing their license. And they were also asked how many would like an outdoor, to extend their outdoor ability, an extension on their outdoor seating arrangement. And so we now have Paparazzi, Trails End Cafe, 80 Thoreau, Karma, and Main Street, all of whom have requested an extension. So, is there a question?
I just had a question because we haven't seen the applications, or at least I haven't. Is in the application, is there any discussion about snow removal? I mean, one, I'm glad that the applications are being applied for, or they're, you know, the extensions are being applied for. I'm just thinking about weather and wondering how that's, you know, what the planning process is for that.
Jeremy, are you on the line?
Well.
Yes, I am. Well, let's even go ahead.
Oh, sorry, sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to say, as far as I'm aware, in the applications that the select board originally approved and the plans they submitted, there would be no issues that would, you know, involve the town as regards to snow removal, because the applicants would be responsible for snow removal on the premises. You know, just like clearing out tables and stuff like that. So there are no known issues as far as I'm aware. And these are applications that the select board previously approved throughout the summer.
So just to, if I could just build on what Jeremy's 100% right. I think there were deadlines built into the governor's orders, but then he revised them to give towns the ability to extend it longer. And our dividing line was, if like paparazzi is a good example, it's in their parking lot that they own. So the snow removal is their issue to work around. What we're doing is not recommend. I don't think I don't think we have any, but if we did, we would not recommend approving outdoor dining in public spaces, sidewalks, rights of way, things like that, because of snow operations. But if it's their own property and they're managing that, we want to be able to support them.
And I think one property already indicated he would need to get approval from his landlord. And I think that affects a couple of them. Jane, did you want to?
Sorry.
I guess I was wondering about Main Street Market. I mean, that was the obvious one to me.
I'm not sure. I have to double check on who owns the alleyway there. If that's their property or if that's town property. I'm not sure about that, but that is generally, we should look into that. I had been thinking about that as well, Jane. And I think when their license we can go back to their original license application. I didn't think that was in town right away.
I can say that, as I recall, when the outdoor seating was initially approved, the town manager at the time was clear to point out that alley needed to be kept clear otherwise, with no trucks parked there and so forth. So we may need to revisit that stipulation.
Sure.
Okay.
Linda.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Linda. On the liquor license fee thing, that went quick. I just wanted to make a quick comment about that. I can wait till the end of this discussion and vote.
Yeah, let's if you don't mind. Susan?
Yeah, I just had a question. Is Karma's outdoor seating in the parking lot and back?
Along the side.
Oh, along the side, right, okay.
Okay. So your comment, Stephen, was on another issue, correct? So I think I would entertain a motion.
Move to extend the validity of Paparazzi, Trails End Cafe, 80th Row, and Main Street Market and Cafe's license for on-premises alcohol consumption on an extended license premises to include outdoor premises, consistent with the governor's COVID-19 orders number 35 and 37, and the Alcohol Beverage and Control Commission's guidelines for extension of premises to patio and outdoor areas. This authorization shall be extended from December 1, 2020 until 60 days after the COVID state of emergency is rescinded, at which point the applicant's licensed premises will revert to the licensed premises in effect prior to such approval. I just want to say that Karma was not in that motion. It's in the you know, the list of restaurants that we spoke about, but the motion needs to, so I'm going to include Karma in that motion.
And I would also suggest that prior to the second part of the motion, that you say consistent with town requirements for snow removal and other requirements.
That comes after outdoor areas, is that this? Okay. All right.
Second, as amended.
Okay. I think we've captured it. Is everyone comfortable? Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Did I?
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
That's unanimous, and I so declare. Thank you, everyone. So the next item is Select Board calendar. Matt, oh, sorry, Stephen, yes, you wanted to mention
Yeah,
something.
that would, just to give the board kind of a sense of where my head's at on it. I don't see that as a forever thing, but I don't necessarily see it ending at the end of the declaration of emergency where a lot of these things are set to end. I think we're going to watch to see what is the economic recovery and be a little bit flexible, but I don't see this payment plans enduring, into the future. Hopefully we all get back to full strength from an economic standpoint, and we can go back to our normal fee structures. So I just wanted to put.
And I think, yeah, that's a point well taken. And I think, as you've previously mentioned, not everyone has, there's just a small group at this point that have requested that. So as appropriate, we're going to try to be flexible. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to the Select Board calendar. So many of us, Matt, you've been exempt from this, I think, have met every single week since COVID started. That has been necessary, particularly during the first several months, just to keep up with all the changes and regulations and challenges we were facing. And through town meeting, quite frankly. We've continued that this fall. And that's been helpful. We've certainly, for the most part, had a great deal of activity that we're dealing with. But I would like to suggest that beginning on the 14th, so we're going to meet on the 7th, but that beginning on December 14th, that we meet every other week. And if as need arises as we get closer to town meeting, we frequently are adding multiple extra meetings anyway. And I'd like to suggest that we adopt that calendar. One, it gives staff more time to work on things. It certainly gives us as select board members to work on things, to get things done. And that's my recommendation. So comments, it's open to your feedback on that. Matt, who hasn't lived through every single week.
I totally misconstrued this agenda topic, because what I thought we were going to do is talk about how through our annual calendar of meetings, we were going to address the goals that we've set for ourselves, and that
comes
how can we back schedule effectively that we can cover these points.
Yep.
And I guess what I would like to kind of see is, line them up against, not that we can do it like that we can guarantee that, oh, we can take care of this one in one meeting or something, but just that we kind of have the space to take on these topics. And I don't know, before we start to, I understand that it's wearing to do weekly meetings. Even with the amount of time I've served, it's a job, but that I also worry that if we go to a, bi-weekly cadence, that we're unlikely to get to all of these things. So that's my concern. I don't, again, I haven't worked it out, and I would defer to the chair, of course, to do so, but we do have quite a lot of goals, and I just don't know if there's enough time to make it through this if we go to a bi-weekly schedule.
We do, and some of our goals are dependent on staff divisions and departments to work on, because they're taking our lead. They now have been following our lead on the goals that we've put out there. Some of them are directly on our plate. Some of it are sort of on our plate and their plate. So, but your point's well taken, Matt, in terms of, the action plan. But I'm differentiating schedule from action plan right now, because I think we can do both. Other comments, Susan?
Yeah, I'm a little, I have similar concerns to Matt and that there, what's backlogged now that we should address. Terry brought up a few things at the last meeting and
right. Yep.
I just want to make sure they're included in the list of
Yes.
to-dos.
Yep, they are. Yep. Jane, were you had?
Since I probably have the greatest experience of anybody on this select board, you know, it is a 6 1/2 dozen in the sense of by having weekly meetings, we sometimes are able to conclude business in a fairly concise period of time. Whereas our select board meetings every other week historically have gone on much later. Granted, they started later. And that's another question mark. I guess as also the one on the board that has the most interest in accomplishing as many things before my term ends, I'm somewhat agnostic, although my work schedule would appreciate more time available. That doesn't mean I'm unwilling to do weekly meetings. I guess I'm being somewhat I'm balancing on ahead of the pin. It would be nice to have every other week back from a standpoint of getting work done, thinking through what we have as a select board in front of us, and engaging with citizens as well, because that's often something that happens. You know, sometimes you don't hear from the people who just caught up, and that's one of the roles that I take seriously. So I wait to hear what my fellow select board members chime in on. Linda, I appreciate your proposal.
Terry?
I agree with everything that's been said. It's a hard decision. I did bring up a number of topics last week and that I feel we're backlogged on. And if we could catch up on those, it would be really great to then go to the every other week, because I think it would be better for staff that could prepare better and get us materials earlier. It'd be better for you, Linda. You're probably going nuts trying to get this done every week. So in particular, the ones that I think we really are backlogged on are, as Matt said, some kind of action plan for reaching our select board goals. And listening to you, Linda, it sounds like you have a plan, but we just haven't discussed it as a board. And my second one is the town manager evaluation that, you know, we did that months ago and we just haven't had time to put it on our agenda. I think if we could get these two things on.
So here's what I think I'm hearing from all of you. Thank you, Terry. Here's what I think I'm hearing from, we're not ready for this. We're not ready for to take a hiatus. And so we'll carry on and do the best we can.
I would say that we could have a solstice
and
holiday on December 21st and perhaps the Martin Luther King holiday that's coming up in January. These are already sort of natural times. I don't know.
And we have Middle Eastern who celebrate a different holiday, Middle Eastern residents who celebrate a different holiday. Yeah, so we've got about 5 holidays here coming up in the month as well. So, but it sounds like we're not ready to do this. So I'm ready to.
But Linda, I think we could be ready if we could get a couple of these major things done.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing is to currently in the legislature is Senate Bill 2500, which is an act setting next generation climate policy. And like all of the legislation that's up there, it is now, we're being asked again to authorize the chair to submit a letter of support for this. This, like many other legislative bills that are before the legislature right now. It's hard to know which ones of these will get attention before the end of the session and which will not. But this has come to our attention in terms of asking for our support. Jane.
Since that came through several of the committees that I'm the liaison to, I'm glad to see it on the agenda. It also is the first piece in a number of actions the select board is going to be asked to take. I think I reviewed in my liaison report last week, it's not a proclamation, but the agreement with coming from CAB that we're likely to see after this letter that would be, you know, a support of a non-binding resolution at the state to undertake certain actions and would be a natural, you know, second step. I was wondering, Linda, if you had heard from Jake Swenson, the chair of the Climate Action Advisory Board, and whether or not, for instance, these two amendments whether our Representative Gouveia or Senator Barrett have weighed in on these.
I have not heard, but I did check what was the status of the bill just before our meeting this afternoon. And it's on the docket for consideration.
Right. And I don't think that either Senator Barrett or Representative Gouveia would be at all opposed. I'm just curious as to whether or not they've mentioned anything. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? So do I hear an motion to authorize the chair to sign a letter in support of amendment? I'm going to say House Bill 4933, but it's really the focus now is on Senate 2500. They both were informing each other.
Move to authorize the select board chair.
Is there a second? Jane, yeah, okay. Sorry, clerk, Madam Clerk.
I like to call the roll now.
Yes, please.
Okay. Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, that's unanimous and the chair so declares. Thank you. In the interest of time, is there any pressing liaison report that needs to be made this week that we haven't in some way referenced previously? If not, I'd like to table that until the next meeting. Miscellaneous correspondence. I have, Jane?
Don't we have committee nominations?
Yes, thank you. Madam Clerk, would you like to read the committee nominations?
Yes. Move to nominate Krista Collins of 55 Highland Street, Sue Felshen of 19 Sunnyside Lane, Robert Hartman of 16 Concord Green, and Harry Bartlett of 95 Conant Street to the Junction Village Open Space Task Force for terms to expire on April 30th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. And there's no committee appointments this week. We've already spoken about the committee liaison reports, miscellaneous correspondence. I have none. Public comments. Okay, hearing none. All right, and so I would suggest that we're going to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session to discuss ongoing litigation regarding Estabrook Road. Doing so in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigation strategy. Do I hear a motion from?
Move to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session to discuss ongoing litigation regarding Estabrook Road. Doing so in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigation strategy.
Okay, second. Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask that the select board members log out and log in again as quickly as possible. Thank you.